Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Call. Jeff Shannon's hands gripped the steering wheel as he navigated through downtown traffic, his mind still buzzing from the successful merger meeting. At 42, he'd built his cybersecurity firm from nothing, earning respect in Silicon Valley's cutthroat world through sharp instincts and uncompromising principles. His phone buzzed, Christina's ringtone. "Hey babe, just wrapped up the Morrison deal." "Jeff." His wife's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with an edge he'd never heard before. "You need to come home. Now." Something cold settled in his chest. In 15 years of marriage, Christina Shannon had weathered his deployments overseas, his late nights building the business, and their daughter's teenage rebellions with unwavering strength. She didn't break easily. "What's wrong? Is Ashley? Please, just come home." The line went dead. Jeff's military training kicked in, the same hyper-awareness that had kept him alive during 2 tours in Afghanistan before he transitioned to corporate life. He pulled a U-turn, ignoring the honking horns, and floored the accelerator toward their suburban home in Palo Alto. 20 minutes later, he rounded the corner of Maple Street, and his blood ran cold. Police cars lined their driveway, their red and blue lights painting the afternoon in ominous colors. An ambulance sat idle, its rear doors closed. Neighbors clustered on sidewalks, whispering behind cupped hands. Jeff parked haphazardly and sprinted toward his house. A uniformed officer moved to intercept him, but Jeff's commanding presence and obvious panic made the cop step aside. Christina. She emerged from behind a patrol car like a ghost. His wife, normally vibrant with her auburn hair perfectly styled and green eyes bright with intelligence, looked hollow. Her clothes were rumpled, mascara streaked down her pale cheeks. "Thank God you're here," she whispered, falling into his arms. "Where's Ashley? What happened?" Christina's body shook against his. She's at the hospital. Physical exam. They needed to." She couldn't finish. A detective approached, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Shannon? I'm Detective Lawrence Bennett. We need to talk. Is my daughter okay?" "She's alive. But sir, we've uncovered some disturbing evidence in her room. Your wife insisted we wait for you before proceeding." Jeff's jaw tightened. "What kind of evidence?" Christina grabbed his arm. "Don't go in there, Jeff. Please. I saw it, and I might never get those images out of my head." But Jeff was already moving toward the house, that familiar calm settling over him, the same state of mind that had made him a decorated Army Ranger. Christina and Detective Bennett followed reluctantly. Ashley's room had always been her sanctuary, walls covered with art she'd created, shelves lined with books, a desk where she did homework and video called friends. Now it looked like a crime scene, which Jeff realized with growing horror it was. "We found these hidden behind a loose baseboard," Bennett said, holding up evidence bags. "Photos, videos, dating back at least 2 years. Jeff's vision tunneled as he processed what he was seeing. His 16-year-old daughter, captured in compromising positions. Someone had been systematically documenting her. Someone had been. Jesus Christ. The words came out as a growl. "There's more," Bennett continued. "We found correspondence. Text messages. Someone's been grooming your daughter for months, maybe longer. Building trust, isolating her from you and your wife, making her believe this was normal." Christina sobbed behind them. She kept saying everything was fine. "We thought she was just being a typical teenager, wanting privacy." Jeff's mind raced, analyzing the evidence with the same methodical approach he used to identify security vulnerabilities for his clients. But this wasn't code to be debugged or a system to be protected. This was his daughter. "Do we know who?" His voice was deadly quiet. Bennett hesitated. "We're still investigating, but based on the digital footprints we've found, we believe it's someone with regular access to your home. Someone Ashley trusts." The implications hit Jeff like a physical blow. Not a stranger. Someone in their circle. Someone who'd sat at their dinner table, shared their lives, earned their trust while systematically destroying their daughter's innocence. "We'll find them," Bennett assured him. "This kind of evidence makes for a strong case." Jeff nodded, but something dark was already crystallizing in his mind. The legal system would do what it could, but Jeff Shannon had other resources, other skills. And whoever had done this to Ashley had just made the worst mistake of their life. Chapter 2. The Investigation. 3 days later, Jeff sat in his home office, surrounded by multiple monitors, each displaying a different piece of the digital puzzle. His cybersecurity expertise, honed through years of protecting corporations from threats, now served a more personal mission. The police investigation was thorough, but Jeff had access to resources and techniques that law enforcement couldn't, or wouldn't, use. Ashley was staying with Christina's sister while they processed what had happened. His daughter had barely spoken since the discovery, retreating into herself in a way that broke Jeff's heart. The few words she had shared were filled with shame and confusion, convinced somehow that she was to blame. The metadata on these photos tells a story, Jeff muttered, examining the digital fingerprints embedded in each file. The perpetrator had been clever, using encrypted apps and proxy servers, but they'd made mistakes. Everyone did, eventually. Christina appeared in the doorway with coffee, her face drawn but determined. The initial shock was giving way to fierce maternal rage. Find anything? More than I wanted to. Jeff pulled up a timeline on his largest monitor. This didn't start recently. Look at the first images. Ashley was barely 14. Whoever did this has been patient, methodical. Like a predator. Exactly like a predator. Jeff's jaw clenched. But they got careless in the past few months. Started using devices with location services enabled. I could track movement patterns. Christina leaned over his shoulder, studying the data. As an emergency room physician, she was used to seeing the worst of human nature, but this was different. This was personal. Here, Jeff highlighted a series of data points. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening for the past 6 months. Always during Ashley's study group. Christina's voice dripped with bitter understanding. She said she was going to Emily Mueller's house. Jeff was already typing, accessing security footage from traffic cameras along the route Ashley would have taken. His military connections had opened doors in the private sector, including relationships with companies that managed urban surveillance systems. There, Christina pointed at the screen. That's Ashley's car. Jeff tracked the route, his expression growing darker with each turn. The car didn't head toward Emily's house in the residential district. Instead, it wound through downtown Palo Alto and stopped at an upscale apartment complex. Cascade Heights. Christina read the building name. I know someone who lives there. Jeff's blood chilled as the pieces clicked into place. Who? Dr. Philip Kramer, Ashley's counselor. Christina's face went pale. Oh my God. Jeff, we referred her to him ourselves. The name hit Jeff like a physical blow. Dr. Philip Kramer, respected child psychologist, pillar of the community. The man they trusted to help Ashley through the normal struggles of adolescence. The man who'd been in their home for dinner, who'd attended Ashley's art shows, who'd earned their complete trust. Jeff's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up everything he could find on Kramer. Public records, professional licenses, social media activity, financial information. His military intelligence training had taught him to build complete profiles on targets. And Philip Kramer had just become a target. Divorced 3 years ago, Jeff read aloud. Ex-wife filed a restraining order, but later dropped it. 2 previous practices in different states before moving here. Pattern of relocating every few years. He's done this before. Christina's voice was hollow. That's what I'm thinking. Jeff opened another window, accessing databases that weren't exactly public. I need to know everything about this bastard. His habits, his weaknesses, his secrets. As if summoned by their conversation, Detective Bennett called. Jeff put him on speaker. We've made an arrest, Bennett announced. Dr. Philip Kramer. We found enough evidence in his apartment to put him away for a very long time. Christina exhaled in relief, but Jeff's expression remained grim. What's the likely sentence? With a good lawyer? Maybe 15 years, out in 8 with good behavior. Bennett's tone suggested he understood Jeff's frustration. I know it's not enough, but it's what the system can deliver. After hanging up, Jeff and Christina sat in silence. 8 years. For what Kramer had done to their daughter, for the childhood he'd stolen, for the trust he'd shattered. 8 years felt like nothing. The system failed her before this even happened, Jeff said quietly. All those signs we missed because we trusted a professional. All those missed opportunities to protect her because we believed in institutions and credentials instead of our instincts. Christina studied her husband's face. She recognized the expression from his early military days when he'd come back from classified missions with that same cold determination. "What are you thinking?" Jeff turned back to his monitors, where Kramer's entire life lay mapped out in data points and digital footprints. "I'm thinking the legal system is just one way to deliver justice. And sometimes it's not enough. Jeff, he destroyed our daughter's innocence, stole years of her childhood, made her believe she was complicit in her own abuse." Jeff's voice was deadly calm. 8 years in prison, with therapy and rehabilitation programs, isn't proportional to what he took from her. Christina was quiet for a long moment. As a doctor, she'd sworn an oath to do no harm. But as a mother, she understood exactly what Jeff was contemplating. "What do you need from me?" Jeff looked at his wife, brilliant, compassionate, and now just as committed to true justice as he was. "Help me learn everything about Philip Kramer. Every habit, every fear, every weakness. I want to know him better than he knows himself. And then," Jeff's smile was sharp as a blade, "then we're going to teach him what real consequences feel like." Chapter 3, The Plan. 2 weeks later, Jeff sat across from Dr. Philip Kramer in the county jail's visiting room. Getting a face-to-face meeting had required calling in favors and careful manipulation of the system. But Jeff's military connections and spotless reputation had opened doors. Kramer looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, his carefully maintained facade cracked and crumbling. The man who'd projected such authority and trustworthiness in his office now seemed pathetic, ordinary. But Jeff wasn't fooled. Predators were often masters of disguise. "Mr. Shannon," Kramer's voice carried forced warmth. "I can't tell you how sorry I am about this misunderstanding." "Stop." Jeff's voice cut through the pretense like a knife. "We both know what you did. I've seen the evidence." Kramer's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "The courts will sort this out. I have an excellent legal team." "I'm sure you do." Jeff leaned forward slightly. "But I'm not here to talk about courts or lawyers. I'm here to understand why." The question seemed to catch Kramer off guard. "Why? Why my daughter? Why Ashley specifically?" For the first time, Kramer's composure cracked completely. "You don't understand the psychology. Try me. I've got time." What followed was 30 minutes of the most disturbing conversation of Jeff's life. Kramer, either through arrogance or a desperate need to justify himself, laid out his methodology like a clinical case study. How he identified vulnerable children, how he built trust with families, how he isolated and groomed his victims. Jeff listened with the same focused attention he'd once used to interrogate enemy combatants, filing away every detail, every tell, every weakness in Kramer's psychological armor. Ashley was perfect, Kramer concluded with chilling casualness. Intelligent, artistic, just rebellious enough to want independence from her parents, but still needing approval from authority figures. When you referred her to me, it was like Christmas morning. Jeff's hands remained steady on the table, but inside, something primal was screaming for blood. "How many others?" "What? How many other children have you destroyed?" Kramer's smile was pure evil. "You'll never know, and neither will they. Most of my patients never realize what happened. They just carry the damage forward into their adult lives, thinking it's their fault." Jeff stood slowly, memorizing every line of Kramer's face. "Thank you for being honest. Where are you going?" Jeff paused at the door. "To make sure you never hurt another child." "The system won't let you," Kramer called after him. "I'll be out in 8 years, maybe less. And there will always be more children like Ashley." Jeff's smile was colder than anything Kramer had ever seen. "We'll see about that." That evening, Jeff met with an old Army buddy in a dive bar downtown. Jorge Fry had served 3 tours with Jeff before transitioning into private security work, the kind that operated in gray areas where government agencies couldn't or wouldn't go. "You're sure about this?" Jorge asked after Jeff had outlined his plan. "Once we start down this road." He's going to hurt more children, Jeff said simply. The system can't stop him, won't stop him. Someone has to. Jorge studied his friend's face. This isn't just about justice anymore. This is about sending a message. Maybe. Does that change anything? Jorge finished his beer and stood. I'll make some calls. But Jeff, what you're talking about isn't just illegal. It's warfare. Good. Because he declared war on my family the moment he touched my daughter. Meanwhile, Christina was conducting her own investigation at the hospital where she worked. Her colleague, Dr. Emma Singh, had provided access to medical databases and professional networks that painted a disturbing picture of Kramer's past. 3 different states, 6 different practices, Emma reported. Each time he relocated, there were complaints. Never enough to build a case, but patterns emerge when you know what to look for. How many victims? Dozens probably, maybe hundreds over his career. Emma's face was grim. The system protected him every time. Professional courtesy, benefit of the doubt, sealed juvenile records. Christina felt sick. We handed Ashley to a serial predator. You trusted the system. That's what parents are supposed to do. Emma paused. What's Jeff planning? I don't know all the details, but he's not planning to let Kramer hurt anyone else. Christina. Emma's voice carried a warning. Whatever Jeff is thinking, it could destroy your family as much as it destroys Kramer. Christina considered this. Our family was already destroyed. Kramer made sure of that. Now we're just deciding what to build from the ashes. That night, Jeff sat in Ashley's empty room, surrounded by evidence of the daughter he'd failed to protect. Her artwork still covered the walls, vibrant, hopeful creations from before Kramer had poisoned her world. His phone buzzed with a message from Jorge. Team assembled. Timeline confirmed. You sure about the location? Jeff typed back. Kramer chose the battlefield when he decided to hurt children. Now I choose the tactics. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Kramer would be released on bail pending trial. His lawyers were already working on that. When he walked out of jail, he'd think he was going home to prepare his defense. Instead, he'd be walking into a carefully constructed nightmare that would make him understand, on the deepest possible level, what it felt like to be powerless, afraid, and completely at someone else's mercy. Jeff wasn't just planning Kramer's punishment. He was planning his education. And by the time it was over, Philip Kramer would beg for the safety of a prison cell. Chapter 4. The Setup. 3 days after Kramer made bail, Jeff put his plan into motion. The predator had returned to his upscale apartment, probably thinking he was clever for posting bail through a third-party bondsman to avoid media attention. What he didn't know was that Jeff had been watching every move since the moment he'd walked out of county lockup. Jorge Fry sat in a surveillance van across from Cascade Heights, monitoring feed from cameras they'd placed throughout the building. Target's in apartment 4B. Looks like he's settling in for the night. Security systems? Jeff asked through his earpiece. Disabled. Your cyber skills are paying off. Jeff smiled grimly. Breaking into Kramer's digital life had been almost insultingly easy for someone of his expertise. The man who'd been so methodical in grooming children was sloppy with his own security. Bank accounts, email, social media, even his smart home system, all compromised. Phase 1 is go, Jeff announced. At 2:47 a.m., Kramer woke to find his apartment's lights strobing in a disorienting pattern. His smart TV blared audio from his own recorded sessions with Ashley, her voice, young and confused, asking why the therapy exercises felt wrong. He stumbled from bed, trying to shut off the devices, but nothing responded to his commands. Every screen in the apartment displayed the same message. You hurt children. Kramer's hands shook as he grabbed his phone to call for help, only to discover his contacts had been replaced with names of his victims. Where Mom used to be listed, now it read Sarah Martinez, age 13. His lawyer's number was replaced with Tommy Chun, age 14. The psychological warfare had begun. By the third night, Kramer hadn't slept more than an hour at a time. Every time he dozed off, his smart home system would activate. Lights, sounds, temperature changes designed to keep him in a constant state of stress and paranoia. His food deliveries were intercepted and replaced with meals that contained legal but unpleasant additives. His water supply, controlled by smart home technology, delivered a steady trickle instead of normal pressure. His internet connection worked just well enough to let him see that his professional reputation was being systematically destroyed through carefully leaked information to his colleagues and former patients. But the real psychological torture was more subtle. Jeff had studied Kramer's patterns obsessively, learning his fears and insecurities from recorded therapy sessions the predator had kept as trophies. Kramer was claustrophobic, so the apartment's smart blinds would close randomly, creating a sense of confinement. He was germophobic, so surfaces in his apartment were contaminated with harmless but visible substances that would trigger his anxieties. He craved control, so every system in his environment was made unreliable and unpredictable. Dr. Emma Singh met Christina at their usual coffee shop, both women looking exhausted. "How's Ashley?" "Better. The child psychologist we found, a real one this time, says she's making progress." Christina's voice carried cautious hope. "She actually smiled yesterday. First time since." "And Jeff?" Christina was quiet for a moment. "He's different, focused in a way that scares me sometimes. But Ashley trusts him completely. She knows he's fighting for her." "What exactly is he doing to Kramer?" "Psychological warfare, making him understand what it feels like to be powerless and afraid." Christina met Emma's concerned gaze. "He's not physically harming him, but he's making sure Kramer experiences terror every single day." "Christina, that's still..." "What? Illegal? Immoral?" Christina's voice carried steel. "Kramer destroyed dozens of children over 20 years. The system never stopped him. Someone has to." Emma studied her friend's face. "You've changed too. Good." The old Christina trusted institutions and followed rules. "Look where that got my daughter." Meanwhile, Jeff was implementing phase 2 of his plan. Through his network of military contacts, he'd gained access to Kramer's complete professional history, not just the public records, but sealed files from previous investigations. What he found was worse than expected. Kramer hadn't just abused his position as a therapist. He'd been part of a larger network of predators, sharing victims and techniques with others in positions of trust. Teachers, coaches, clergy members, all connected through encrypted communications that law enforcement had never uncovered. The discovery changed everything. This wasn't just about punishing one monster. It was about exposing and destroying an entire network. Jeff made a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. He contacted investigative journalists, providing them with carefully curated evidence that would lead to the network's exposure. But he didn't stop there. Each member of the network would receive the same treatment as Kramer. Jorge's team was already expanding, recruiting specialists who understood that some threats to children required solutions outside the legal system. "You're starting a war," Jorge warned during one of their planning sessions. "No," Jeff corrected. "I'm finishing one that's been going on for years. These bastards have been hunting children in the shadows. Time to drag them into the light." By the end of the week, Philip Kramer was a broken man. His apartment had become a prison of psychological torment. His professional reputation was in ruins, and his carefully constructed life had collapsed entirely. But Jeff wasn't finished. The real punishment hadn't even begun. Kramer's bail hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. His lawyers were confident they could get him released pending trial, possibly even with a plea bargain that would minimize his sentence. They had no idea that Jeff Shannon had already ensured Philip Kramer would never make it to that hearing. At least, not in any condition to benefit from it. Chapter 5. The Trap. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching Jeff's mood as he watched Kramer's apartment building from across the street. The predator had spent the weekend in his psychological prison, probably thinking the worst was over now that his bail hearing was just hours away. He was wrong. "Target's moving," Jorge reported through the earpiece. "Looks like he's heading to his lawyer's office early." Jeff smiled coldly. Kramer was nothing if not predictable. The same methodical nature that had made him effective at grooming children also made him easy to manipulate. The morning routine hadn't varied once during their surveillance. "All units, Phase 3 is active." Kramer stepped out of his apartment building, squinting against the morning light. His once immaculate appearance had deteriorated over the past week. Wrinkled clothes, unwashed hair, the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept properly in days. He never noticed the surveillance van or the figure following him at a distance. His paranoia had made him jumpy, but it had also made him sloppy. He was so focused on shadows that he missed the real threats. The route to his lawyer's office took Kramer through Meridian Park, a shortcut he'd used hundreds of times. Today, however, the path would take him somewhere else entirely. "Mr. Kramer?" The voice came from behind a cluster of oak trees. Kramer spun around, his heart racing. "Who's there?" A man stepped out from the shadows, tall, bearded, wearing the kind of casual clothes that wouldn't be remembered or described clearly later. "You don't know me, but I know you. I know what you did to those children." I have to get to my lawyer." "No, you don't." The words were spoken softly, but they carried absolute certainty. Kramer suddenly realized he was in serious danger. He turned to run and found two more men blocking his path. All three wore the kind of calm, professional demeanor that marked them as either law enforcement or military. But Kramer's instincts told him these men weren't bound by law enforcement rules. "What do you want?" "Justice," the first man replied. "The kind of courts can't deliver." 20 minutes later, Kramer found himself in the back of a windowless van, hands zip-tied, a black hood over his head. The psychological torture of the past week had been nothing compared to the pure terror he felt now. "Where are you taking me?" His voice cracked like a child's. "Somewhere you can think about what you've done," came the reply. The van drove for what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes. When it finally stopped, Kramer was dragged out and marched across what sounded like gravel, then down steps into what smelled like a basement. When the hood was finally removed, Kramer found himself in a windowless concrete room lit by a single bare bulb. The space was clean but sterile, like a medical facility or an interrogation chamber. Jeff Shannon stepped into the light. "Hello, Philip." Kramer's eyes widened with recognition and terror. "You can't do this. This is kidnapping. This is justice." Jeff's voice was calm, almost conversational. The kind that considers the victim instead of the perpetrator's rights. "I want a lawyer." "You're not under arrest. You're not in police custody. You're in my custody." Jeff pulled up a chair and sat down, making the interaction feel even more surreal. "Do you know where we are, Philip?" Kramer looked around frantically. The concrete walls, the industrial lighting, the complete isolation, it could be anywhere. "This is a private facility," Jeff continued. "Completely off the grid. Soundproof. No surveillance cameras, no oversight, no rules except the ones I make. You can't just disappear me. People will look. Your lawyer thinks you skipped bail and fled the country. Your ex-wife hasn't spoken to you in 2 years. Your colleagues think you're a monster. Who exactly is going to look for you?" The truth of Jeff's words hit Kramer like a physical blow. In his methodical destruction of children's lives, he'd also isolated himself completely. There was no one who would miss him or fight for him. "What do you want?" Jeff leaned forward. "I want you to experience what you put those children through. The fear, the powerlessness, the confusion about what's happening to you. I'm not a child. No, but you're about to understand what it feels like to be completely at someone else's mercy." What followed was 3 days of carefully orchestrated psychological pressure. Jeff had studied enhanced interrogation techniques during his military service, but he also understood that physical torture was both ineffective and unnecessary for his purposes. Instead, Kramer experienced a precise campaign of psychological manipulation designed to break down his defenses and force him to confront the reality of his crimes. Sleep deprivation, but not enough to cause permanent damage. Disorientation, lights that went on and off at random intervals, making it impossible to track time. Psychological pressure. Recorded testimonies from his victims played on loop, forcing him to hear their pain in their own words. And through it all, Jeff was a constant presence, asking questions, demanding explanations, refusing to let Kramer hide behind clinical terminology or psychological justifications. "Tell me about Ashley," Jeff would say. "Not Dr. Kramer's patient. Ashley Shannon, the 16-year-old girl you traumatized." By the third day, Kramer was broken. The veneer of professional authority had cracked completely, revealing the pathetic, insecure man underneath. He begged, he pleaded, he promised to confess to everything if Jeff would just let him go. "I'll tell them about the network," Kramer sobbed. "All of them. Every name, every location, every victim I know about." Jeff studied the broken man with cold satisfaction. Now we're getting somewhere. Chapter 6, The Network. The confessions that poured out of Philip Kramer over the next 12 hours were worse than anything Jeff had imagined. The Predator Network wasn't just a loose association of criminals. It was an organized system with established protocols, security measures, and a sophisticated method for identifying and sharing victims. "Start with the names," Jeff commanded, his voice recorder capturing every detail. Kramer's voice was hoarse from crying. "Russell McGrath. He's a high school coach in Sacramento. Specializes in vulnerable teenage athletes. And Dale Rich. He runs a youth program in Oakland." The list went on. 12 men in positions of trust spread across Northern California, all connected through encrypted messaging and regular meetings disguised as professional conferences. How do you communicate? Encrypted app called Secure Chat. We use code names based on chess pieces. "I'm the bishop." Jeff felt sick but kept pressing. "How do you share information?" Cloud storage. Encrypted drives. We trade photographs, videos, sometimes we... Kramer couldn't finish. "Sometimes you what?" "Sometimes we arrange meetings. If one of us has a particularly responsive subject, the others might want access." Jeff's fists clenched involuntarily. They weren't just individual predators. They were running a trafficking operation using children from their own communities. Who's in charge? The king. His real name is Merle McIntyre. He's a district attorney in Contra Costa County. He coordinates everything, provides legal protection when anyone gets too close to being caught. The revelation hit Jeff like a sledgehammer. A district attorney, someone with the power to quash investigations, suppress evidence, intimidate witnesses. No wonder the network had operated with impunity for so long. "How many children have you hurt, Philip? All of you combined?" Kramer's face crumbled. "Hundreds, maybe thousands over the years. We keep records, statistics. It was like a game to some of them." Jeff stood up abruptly, walking to the far corner of the room before he did something he'd regret. This wasn't just about Ashley anymore. This was about an entire generation of children who'd been systematically abused by the very people their parents trusted to protect them. When he turned back to Kramer, his expression was deadly calm. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me everything. Names, addresses, passwords, security protocols. Every piece of information that will help me destroy this network. And then you're going to disappear." Terror flashed across Kramer's face. "You're going to kill me?" "I'm going to give you a choice," Jeff replied. "Option 1. You confess everything to law enforcement. Provide testimony that will put every member of this network behind bars and spend the rest of your life in protective custody, assuming the other network members don't have you killed first." Kramer nodded frantically. "Yes, okay, I'll do that." "Option 2. Jeff continued. "You disappear. New identity, new life, somewhere far away from children. But first, you help me take down the network from the inside." "What do you mean?" Jeff smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You're going to be my inside man, Philip. You're going to help me destroy every single member of this network." 2 days later, Jeff sat in his home office while Christina watched him work. The information Kramer had provided was being systematically organized and verified. Phone numbers, addresses, financial records, digital evidence. All of it building toward a coordinated strike against the entire network. "This is bigger than we thought," Christina said, reading over the files. "How do we handle something this massive?" Carefully, Jeff pulled up a tactical map showing the locations of all network members. "We can't just turn everything over to law enforcement. McIntyre has too much influence, too many connections. He'd find a way to warn the others." "So what's the plan?" "We hit them all simultaneously. No warning, no chance to destroy evidence or flee. And we make sure the evidence is so overwhelming that even McIntyre can't suppress it." Christina studied the map. "You're talking about coordinating multiple operations across 3 counties. Jorge's team is expanding. We've got former military, private investigators, cybersecurity experts. People who understand that sometimes the system needs help to function properly. And Kramer. Jeff's expression hardened. Kramer becomes our inside source. He confirms meeting locations, provides access codes, helps us build airtight cases against every member. Then he disappears forever. Jeff. Christina's voice carried concern. What you're describing isn't just vigilante justice anymore. This is warfare. Good, because that's exactly what this is. Jeff turned to face his wife. These bastards have been waging war against children for decades. The only difference is now they're going to face an enemy that fights back. Christina was quiet for a moment. Ashley asked me yesterday if you were going to make sure the bad men couldn't hurt other kids. What did you tell her? I told her that her father was the kind of man who finishes what he starts. Jeff smiled, the first genuine warmth Christina had seen from him in weeks. Then we better get back to work. That night, as Christina slept, Jeff made a secure phone call to Jorge Fry. Status report? Teams are in position in Sacramento, Oakland, Contra Costa, and 3 other locations. Surveillance is active on all targets. We're ready to move on your signal. Evidence packages? Prepared and ready for simultaneous delivery to FBI, state police, and media contacts. Even if McIntyre tries to interfere, the story will be public before he can react. Jeff looked at a photo of Ashley on his desk, taken before Kramer had poisoned her world, when she still smiled with complete innocence and trust. Tomorrow night, Jeff decided. We end this. Copy that. And Jeff. Yeah. What we're doing, it's going to save a lot of children. I know. That's the only reason I can sleep at night. But Jeff didn't sleep that night. He spent the hours until dawn making final preparations for the most important mission of his life. Not just for Ashley, but for every child these monsters had hurt and every child they might hurt in the future. The network had made one fatal mistake. They'd hurt Jeff Shannon's daughter. Now, they were going to learn that some fathers don't just get mad. They get even. Chapter 7. The Strike. Tuesday, 11:47 p.m. Jeff sat in the surveillance van outside Merle McIntyre's suburban home, watching the district attorney through thermal imaging equipment. The target was in his study, probably reviewing cases and thinking he was untouchable behind his wall of legal immunity and political connections. All teams, radio check. Jeff spoke quietly into his headset. Team Alpha, Oakland position confirmed. Jorge's voice was steady and professional. Team Bravo, Sacramento, in position. Team Charlie, standing by in Contra Costa. 5 more teams confirmed their positions across Northern California. Months of planning had led to this moment. A coordinated strike designed to take down the entire network before any member could warn the others. Remember, we want them alive and talking, Jeff reminded everyone. Evidence first, justice second. At exactly midnight, 12 tactical operations began simultaneously. McIntyre's house was Jeff's personal target. The district attorney had used his position to protect predators for years, making him the most dangerous member of the network. Taking him down required someone with Jeff's specific skill set. The security system was bypassed easily. Jeff's cybersecurity expertise made McIntyre's consumer-grade protection laughably inadequate. Motion sensors, cameras, door alarms, all disabled remotely while the DA sat obliviously in his study. Jeff moved through the house like a ghost, his military training making him invisible to the man who'd enabled so much horror. The study door was slightly ajar, classical music playing softly while McIntyre reviewed legal briefs. Working late, counselor? McIntyre spun around, his face going white as Jeff stepped out of the shadows. Unlike Kramer, who'd seemed pathetic when cornered, McIntyre radiated cold calculation even in surprise. Mr. Shannon, isn't it? I know who you are. McIntyre's voice carried the authority he was used to wielding in courtrooms. This is breaking and entering. I could have you arrested. By who? You. Jeff smiled coldly. I don't think you'll be issuing any warrants tonight. What do you want? Justice. The kind your office has been preventing for years. McIntyre's eyes narrowed. You have no idea what you're dealing with. The network has protection at every level. State government, federal agencies, judicial appointments. Had protection, Jeff corrected. Past tense. As if summoned by his words, McIntyre's phone began buzzing with incoming calls. One after another, each ring representing another network member being taken into custody. That would be your associates, Jeff explained conversationally. Russell McGrath is currently confessing to everything he's done over the past 15 years. Dale Rich is providing detailed financial records showing how you've been laundering money through fake youth programs. And Dr. Philip Kramer, well, he's been very helpful in mapping out your entire operation. The color drained from McIntyre's face. You can't prove anything. Hearsay testimony from criminals trying to reduce their sentences. Who said anything about testimony? Jeff pulled out a tablet, displaying surveillance footage of McIntyre entering a hotel room with a young boy. We have video evidence, financial records, encrypted communications, physical evidence from multiple crime scenes. McIntyre lunged for his desk drawer, probably reaching for a gun, but Jeff was faster. Years of combat training made the district attorney's desperate move look pathetic in comparison. I wouldn't, Jeff advised, his hand now gripping McIntyre's wrist with crushing force. You're more valuable alive. You're making a mistake. I have connections you can't imagine. This will never stick. Your connections won't help you this time. Jeff released McIntyre's wrist and stepped back. By morning, evidence packages will be delivered to every major news outlet, the FBI's Crimes Against Children Unit, and Internal Affairs departments in 3 counties. Your political protection won't survive that kind of exposure. By 3 a.m., all 12 network members were in custody. Not official custody, but Jeff's kind. Each one had been taken from their homes, presented with overwhelming evidence of their crimes, and given the same choice Jeff had offered Kramer: full confession and cooperation, or disappearance. All 12 chose confession. The evidence collected was staggering. Financial records showing millions of dollars moved through fake charities and youth programs. Digital files containing thousands of images and videos. Communications detailing how victims were selected, groomed, and traded between network members. But most damning were the personal testimonies. Faced with irrefutable evidence and the promise of protection from network retaliation, several members provided detailed confessions that implicated dozens of other predators across multiple states. This is bigger than California, Jorge reported during the post-operation briefing. We're looking at a nationwide network with connections to similar operations in other countries. Jeff felt the weight of the discovery. How many children? Thousands, potentially tens of thousands over the past 2 decades. The number was overwhelming. Jeff had started this journey trying to get justice for Ashley, but he'd uncovered something that made her case look like just the tip of an iceberg. What's our next move? We turn everything over to federal authorities, Jeff decided, but not before we ensure the evidence is public. I won't let bureaucracy or politics bury this again. The next morning, Christina found Jeff in their home office, surrounded by legal documents and evidence files. He looked exhausted but grimly satisfied. It's over, she asked. The network is finished. 12 arrests, hundreds of victims identified. Enough evidence to keep prosecutors busy for years. Jeff rubbed his eyes. But it's bigger than we thought. This was just one node in a much larger operation. So what do we do? Jeff looked at his wife, the woman who'd stood by him through everything, who'd supported his quest for justice even when it led into darkness. We keep fighting, he said simply. There are more networks out there, more predators hiding behind positions of trust. And now we have the resources and experience to find them. Christina nodded. What about Ashley? Ashley gets to grow up in a world where at least 12 monsters can never hurt another child. That's a start. Through the window, they could see their daughter in the backyard, painting at her easel, the first time she'd touched art supplies since the nightmare began. The image she was creating was dark, but powerful, a phoenix rising from ashes. She's going to be okay, Christina observed. She's going to be stronger than okay, Jeff corrected. She's going to be a survivor who knows her father fought for her. His phone buzzed with a secure message from Jorge. Media packages delivered. Story breaks in 4 hours. Network members in federal custody. McIntyre's political career officially over. Jeff smiled as he deleted the message. Philip Kramer, Merle McIntyre, and 10 other predators would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Their network dismantled, their victims finally able to speak without fear. But more importantly, Ashley Shannon could sleep peacefully knowing that the monsters who'd hurt her would never hurt anyone else. Justice, Jeff had learned, wasn't always delivered by courts and judges. Sometimes it required a father who refused to let evil win. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 6 months later, Jeff stood in the federal courthouse watching as Merle McIntyre was led away in shackles, his life sentence making headlines across the country. The former district attorney had aged decades in the months since his arrest, the weight of his crimes and the complete destruction of his reputation finally catching up to him. "How does it feel?" Christina asked, joining Jeff outside the courthouse. "Like it's finally over," Jeff replied, but they both knew that wasn't entirely true. The network's exposure had triggered a nationwide investigation that was still uncovering new victims and conspirators. Jeff's evidence had been the catalyst for the largest child exploitation investigation in FBI history, with cases now active in 15 states and growing. But more personally, the Shannon family was healing. Ashley, now 17, had returned to school with a strength that surprised everyone. The shy, traumatized girl who'd emerged from Kramer's abuse had transformed into a fierce advocate for other survivors. She'd testified at several trials, her voice steady and clear as she described not just what had been done to her, but how her father's relentless pursuit of justice had helped her reclaim her power. "The best part," Ashley had told the court during Kramer's sentencing, "isn't that my dad stopped the bad guys. It's that he showed me I was worth fighting for." The media had tried to paint Jeff as a vigilante, but public opinion was overwhelmingly supportive. When the full scope of the network's crimes became public, hundreds of victims, millions in illegal profits, corruption reaching into the highest levels of law enforcement. Most people viewed Jeff as a hero who'd done what the system couldn't. Congressional hearings were called. New legislation was proposed. Advocacy groups used the Shannon case as an example of why traditional approaches to child protection were inadequate. But Jeff wasn't interested in becoming a public figure or crusader. He'd accomplished what he'd set out to do: protect his daughter and ensure the monsters who'd hurt her could never hurt anyone else. Or so he thought. "Dad, we need to talk." Ashley's voice carried an unusual seriousness as she entered Jeff's home office. Jeff looked up from his computer, where he'd been reviewing security protocols for his business. The past months had brought new clients, parents, and organizations who wanted the kind of protection that went beyond what traditional security firms could offer. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Ashley sat down across from his desk, her expression mature beyond her years. "I've been getting messages from other kids who were hurt by people in the network." Jeff's attention sharpened immediately. "What kind of messages?" "Thank you messages, mostly, but also requests for help." Ashley pulled out her phone, showing Jeff a series of social media messages. "They're asking if you could help them too. Their families, I mean." Jeff read through the messages, his expression growing darker with each one. Stories of abuse, cover-ups, legal systems that failed to protect children while protecting their abusers. "How many messages?" "Hundreds. From all over the country." Ashley's voice grew stronger. "Dad, what you did, it gave other people hope that someone would fight for them too." Jeff was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. He thought the Shannon family's ordeal was over, but Ashley was showing him that it might just be beginning. "What are you thinking?" Christina asked, appearing in the doorway. "I'm thinking," Jeff said slowly, "that we've accidentally started something bigger than just getting justice for Ashley." Christina studied the messages on Ashley's phone. As a doctor, she recognized the signs of trauma in the desperate pleas from families who'd been failed by the system. "These people need help," she observed. "They need what we needed," Ashley corrected. "Someone who won't stop fighting until the bad guys can't hurt anyone else." Jeff looked at his daughter, strong, determined, already showing the kind of leadership that could inspire others. Then at his wife, compassionate, brilliant, committed to healing both individual patients and broken systems. Are you both suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Ashley smiled for the first time since entering the room. I'm suggesting that maybe Dad's war isn't over yet. That evening, Jeff called Jorge Fry. I've been expecting this call, Jorge said without preamble. Oh really? You think I don't read the news? Every week, there's another story about some network of predators getting exposed, some corrupt official getting arrested. Your investigation opened floodgates, Jeff. There's more work out there than 100 teams could handle. Jeff looked around his home office, now covered with case files from desperate families across the country. Each file represented a child who'd been failed by the system, parents who'd run out of legal options, predators who thought they were untouchable. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe it's time to make this official. Create an organization that can do what law enforcement can't or won't do. Help families like yours who need justice more than they need procedure. That's a big step. Yeah, well, you already took the biggest step when you decided Kramer wasn't going to hurt your daughter and get away with it. Jeff was quiet for a moment, thinking about the implications. What Jorge was suggesting would mean turning his quest for personal justice into something much larger. A systematic approach to protecting children from predators who hid behind positions of trust and legal loopholes. I'll need resources, people, technology. Already working on it. Turns out a lot of former military and law enforcement folks have kids too. When they see what you accomplished, they want in. And legal cover. Working on that too. Victim advocacy groups, child protection organizations, even some politicians who want to be on the right side of this issue. What you did was illegal, but it was also necessary. Sometimes the law needs to catch up to justice. Jeff looked at a photo of Ashley on his desk. Not the innocent child from before Kramer, but the strong young woman she'd become. A survivor who'd turned her trauma into purpose. When do we start? We already have. Question is, are you ready to lead it? Jeff Shannon had started this journey as a father seeking justice for his daughter. Now he was being asked to become something more, a protector for every child whose family had been failed by a system that prioritized procedure over protection. It wasn't a responsibility he'd wanted, but as he looked at the case files covering his desk, each one representing a child who needed someone to fight for them, he realized it might be a responsibility he couldn't avoid. Let's do it, he said finally. But we do it right. Professional, legal where possible, and always focused on the children. Understood. Welcome to the war, General Shannon. Jeff smiled grimly. The title felt appropriate. He'd started this as a personal mission of revenge. Now it was becoming something larger, a systematic campaign to protect children from the predators who thought they were untouchable. The Shannon family's nightmare was over. But Jeff Shannon's real work was just beginning. Chapter 9, The Legacy. 1 year later, Jeff stood before a congressional committee investigating child exploitation networks, his testimony carrying the weight of someone who'd seen the problem from both sides, as a victim's father and as someone who'd spent months dismantling the systems that enabled abuse. The fundamental issue, Jeff testified, isn't that we lack laws to protect children. It's that we lack the will to enforce them when the perpetrators have institutional protection. Senator Lawrence Bennett, no relation to the detective who'd first helped the Shannon family, leaned forward at his microphone. Mr. Shannon, your organization has been involved in the investigation and exposure of 17 different exploitation networks across 12 states. How many arrests have resulted? Over 400, Senator. But more importantly, we've identified and provided support for more than 3,000 victims. The numbers were staggering, but Jeff knew they only represented a fraction of the problem. The Shannon Foundation, as it had come to be known, had grown from Jeff's personal quest for justice into a nationally recognized organization that worked with law enforcement, advocacy groups, and families to identify and dismantle networks of predators. Ashley, now 18 and preparing for college, sat in the gallery watching her father testify. She'd become the Foundation's most powerful spokesperson, not despite her trauma, but because of how she'd transformed it into purpose. The biggest thing people don't understand, she told a national news program the week before, is that these networks count on shame and silence. When victims feel like they can't speak up, when families feel like the system won't protect them, predators operate with impunity. My dad didn't just get justice for me. He showed other families that they could fight back too. Christina had taken a leave of absence from her medical practice to run the foundation's victim support programs. Her experience as an emergency physician, combined with her personal understanding of family trauma, made her uniquely qualified to help other families navigate the aftermath of abuse. The legal victories are important, she'd explained to a conference of child psychologists, but healing doesn't happen in courtrooms. It happens when families realize they're not alone, that someone believes them, and that they have the power to reclaim their lives. The Foundation's approach was comprehensive: investigation and evidence gathering, legal support, victim advocacy, and family counseling. But underlying everything was the principle Jeff had learned during his darkest hours. Sometimes the system needed help to function properly. Jorge Fry had become the Foundation's director of operations, overseeing a network of former military and law enforcement professionals who specialized in cases where traditional approaches had failed. "We're not vigilantes," Jorge would tell new team members during training. "We're a resource multiplier for legitimate law enforcement. We go where they can't go, we find evidence they can't access, and we build cases they can prosecute." The distinction was important. The Shannon Foundation operated within legal boundaries most of the time, but they also understood that protecting children sometimes required creative interpretations of those boundaries. Dr. Philip Kramer had kept his bargain. After providing testimony that helped convict dozens of network members, he disappeared into witness protection with a new identity and a permanent prohibition from any contact with children. He would spend the rest of his life under federal monitoring, his every movement tracked and recorded. Merle McIntyre had been less fortunate. The former district attorney's life sentence had been complicated by the fact that his protection of the network had enabled crimes against hundreds of children. Even in protective custody, his reputation followed him. He'd aged rapidly in federal prison, the stress of constant fear and guilt destroying him more effectively than any physical punishment. The other network members had faced similar fates: long sentences, destroyed reputations, and the knowledge that their crimes would follow them forever. Justice isn't just about punishment, Jeff had learned to explain to families seeking the Foundation's help. It's about ensuring that predators can never hurt children again, and that survivors can reclaim their power. As Jeff concluded his testimony, Senator Bennett asked one final question. "Mr. Shannon, what would you tell other parents who find themselves in the position your family was in?" Jeff thought about the question, remembering the desperate father who'd sat in a jail visiting room listening to Kramer's clinical description of child abuse. That man had been driven by rage and a need for revenge. The person answering questions before Congress was motivated by something deeper: a commitment to ensuring no family would face the same isolation and system failure the Shannons had experienced. "I'd tell them that they're not powerless," Jeff replied. "The system is designed to protect institutions and procedure, not children. But parents who are willing to fight for their children can change that system, not through revenge or vigilante justice, but through relentless pressure for accountability and truth." He paused, looking at Ashley in the gallery. "And I'd tell them that their children are watching how they respond to crisis. The greatest gift we can give our kids isn't protection from every danger. It's the knowledge that we'll fight for them when they need us most." Later that evening, the Shannon family sat together in their hotel room, watching news coverage of Jeff's testimony. The stories focused on the Foundation's successes, the networks they'd exposed, the children they'd helped. But for Jeff, Christina, and Ashley, the most important victory was simpler. They were together, stronger than before, and committed to ensuring other families didn't have to fight their battles alone. "So what's next?" Ashley asked, reviewing college applications spread across the hotel bed. "Law school for you, if that's what you want," Christina replied. "The Foundation could use someone with your perspective in legal advocacy." Ashley smiled. "I was thinking about that, but maybe something more direct. Criminal justice, investigative techniques, digital forensics. If we're going to keep finding these networks, we need people who understand how they operate." Jeff looked at his daughter with pride. She transformed her trauma into strength, her victimization into advocacy. The scared 16-year-old who'd been manipulated by Kramer had become a young woman who could inspire other survivors and terrify predators. "Whatever you choose," Jeff said, "you'll have our support. But remember, you don't owe the world your trauma. You've already done more than enough." "I know," Ashley replied. "But I also know that there are other kids out there who need someone to fight for them. And thanks to you, Dad, I know what that looks like." Outside their hotel window, Washington, D.C. stretched into the distance. A city full of people who made decisions about justice, protection, and accountability. Tomorrow, some of those people would read about Jeff's testimony and maybe, just maybe, decide to make those systems work better for families like the Shannons. But tonight, Jeff Shannon was simply a father sitting with his wife and daughter, grateful for their strength and committed to ensuring other families could have the same chance at healing and justice. The war against predators would continue. Networks would be exposed, arrests would be made, and children would be protected. But for the Shannon family, the most important battle had already been won. They'd refused to let evil define their story. Instead, they'd chosen to fight back. And in fighting back, they discovered that justice, real justice, wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about ensuring that love was stronger than fear, that families could overcome trauma, and that predators who thought they were untouchable would learn, eventually, that some fathers never...
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.